Ooh, it's fine week one. So reviewing last week, shoulder series. Any questions come up this week? Any concerns? Anybody have a client that is having trouble doing any of it?
I have one client with a left shoulder injury, right shoulder injury, and he's having a little bit of trouble trying to put his elbows together, and he's having trouble putting weights on his shoulders too. Sometimes when we do some movements, we see some improvement, but in the next day, he feels like double sore than the day before. In the moment, he was like, in the moment, I feel so good and relief, but at the next day, it feels so sore.
Do you know what kind of shoulder surgery he had?
No, he has no surgery. It's just he played tennis a lot, and after that, he start with this shoulder pain, and now it's like he says he feels like a pinch in his shoulder every time he moves his shoulder, and when we do exercises putting weight on the shoulder, he suffers a lot. He says it's like a pinch. It's like a needle in there for me.
Goals of the program when you're putting weight on shoulders? The way that we can adapt to that?
Yeah, and when we do legs, I put him in the V squat or the hack squat because the bar it's a little bit uncomfortable for him. So I put him in the V squat or the hack squat, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And here the shoulders are affecting me, but I prefer doing the V squat or the hack squat than doing the barbell squat. So he's like, he's como dice aguantando. He's like, he prefers feel the pain in his shoulder on the hack squat than in the barbell.
When you say a V squat, I'm looking that up.
Yeah, it's a machine. It's a machine that you put the weight, not the weight, but you put the machine on your shoulders.
Oh, so all like the weights on the back shoulder. And pushing up, pushing backwards.
Yes, V squat.
And then a hack squat.
It's like the same.
Quads, glutes, adductors. Monster quads. So it's like a leg press, but instead of upside down.
Franquita,
you're standing, yes.
You're at like a 45-degree angle.
Me lo puedes preparar como en un bowl. Y ponga el aguacate también.
What about
arroz,
changing?
Eso y aguacate.
Here's the image I get of it, Henry.
Y salsa pep.
Is that accurate?
Lily Bella.
That's the one.
Okay.
So instead of putting that weight on the shoulders, what about holding it to the side? You have a trap bar?
Yeah, we have a trap bar.
Yeah,
the last time we changed it to exactly that exercise with dumbbells and then with the trap hack.
And then trap bar just to a squat, no further than that. Down and back up. Down and back up. And think about, so I want you to cue him to keep his elbows tucked tight to
to
the
the back.
body. What's nice about that trap bar is it's that neutral grip. So it's allows the shoulders to open up. And then remember, if you put any pressure up here, it's just going to compress on all these nerves that come out of here. So his pinch would be aggravated by any pressure right here versus
Yes.
weight in the hands, even a kettlebell to the side, open up and step. So an open up, step, and then just a single leg split stance squat, and then switch to the other side. So half whatever your rep count is in that hack squat, and then hold the weight outside and behind the hip, get the rib cage in front of the hip, so that creates that tension component that we'll actually review today, and then work that single leg work.
Yeah.
And get him out of that machine.
And it's
25
can I add a little bit of feedback the way by talking to the client, because most people do not get what we're talking about, like back chain or whatever, but you can explain to them, okay, now you can, like, you know, like this is better way to target that area, you know, because if you actually put your bony landmarks in that position, you're gonna really get more activation where he's actually wanting it. Yeah, like to add, like in the way that he would talk to that client.
Adductors. So different types of cues, right? Kind of gets into an application lesson. You got tactile cues, which is touch. So you use your hand, or I've got a little pokey stick that I've used in the past. I'll grab it instead of describing it. Show it to you. Tactile cues. Anytime you're cueing a muscle to activate, if you want to target it, it can be helpful to give somebody that tactile cue. So if I want your adductors to fire, I'm going to push right here and have you push into that tactile cue. And that's going to naturally allow them to feel, okay, that's the tissue that I need to close. That would be a lot of the decompression work we're going to be doing today, is a lot of adductor work, tissues from the spine down to the inside of that knee. For the squat, you want to primarily target outside of the hip, lateral band, or the IT band, the iliotibial band. It's a stretchy cord in the outside of the leg from the outside of the hip. So having him just trace that and feeling that tissue, and then letting him know, hey, I want you to activate the tissues that are behind that IT band. That'll keep him from dumping into the quad and keep his hip loaded into the back so he can load it in that single side. You could front load it, weight here, which I find to be a lot easier, especially bilateral work, front loaded squat, because it's going to allow the weight and the hips to counterbalance one another, versus if you don't have that weight and you get back there, you might have a tendency of tipping back. So if you give him that weight in the front of the body, and you're just going to rep out good quality work in front of a mirror, so he gets second kind of cue, which is visual cueing. So you've got tactile, which is touch, you've got visual, and then you've got auditory, which is you saying, hey, I want you to look in the mirror and make sure your feet are stacked under your hips and shoulders. And then you could be to his side and giving him cues of, hey, I want you to keep your butt back, your rib cage forward, and then his pace, his timing of that. If you notice he's out of control by going too fast, then you're going to want to reduce that amount of weight. Get him to a point where he can tolerate that slow and controlled movement, whether it's a trap bar, which is going to be more of a lift with the trap bar, versus a front squat, weight in the front of the body. Both of those things I would replace that machine with, because when you're in that machine and your hips are back and your rib cage is back, you're like in a reclined position. your butt, I mean, look, that butt is like resting on the ground, and you're going to be tempted to drive him through his heels into that machine because he's tilted back. So getting pressure off here because we've got a pinch, we've got a report of a symptom, so we want to protect this area. Weight to the side, kettlebell walks. It's going to help traction, pulling pressure out of that shoulder. Okay, side bends, which week 2 work, but we can get in it. Side bend work with 45-pound or 35-pound plates. Just pinch them, grab them. So you've got grip, you've got neutral grip, you've got neutral in the shoulder. You're just holding. You could walk, step, squat, walk, step, squat. And now you're working in this rotary component. You're cueing him, keep his shoulders open, his chest tall, stay long and decompressed. So you'll want to prime that work with what we're going to go over today in the videos that you're going to get this week on decompressing the body globally in a supine and a prone and a standing and a split stance or a kneeling position. And start to work away from anything that causes symptoms. So when he feels good in the exercise, that's a good sign. What you're getting though is that tissue, when it is in recovery mode, after you're done stretching it, working it out, strengthening it, it's tightening back up. And he's likely going back to these shapes at home. So you're going to want to give him what we go over today as some homework, work with him on it, watch him do it for you, make sure he can do it appropriately. That can be a video you can upload to the channel. I can give feedback if you're uncertain. But you're looking for him to be consistent at home and after your sessions. So he's going to need that recovery focus if he's reporting symptoms post-workout. He said, does he like the machine, or is it something, Henry, that is it adaptable? Can you pull that from his program and adapt it a bit?
Yes.
I think that's your easiest, I'm not going to call it fixed, but like if you're going to pick fruit off of a tree.
Yes.
It's the lowest fruit. First climbing to the top. That's a great start. Great start for adapting his program. Find out he's playing tennis. So that's
playing
where
tennis. That's the problem. He was playing a lot of tennis, and he messed up his
tie
shoulder.
this work in. You can tie this work into his tennis swing, so it'll be more meaningful to him. 2 weights or just one weight or both weights, and you're just trying to sync things up. You could have him walk backwards, you could have him walk forward, and he's going to be controlling that pressure, and it's going to be decompressing the arm. You just want to make sure that he's not, I don't know where his pinch is. I assume it's here. But if it's deep on the other side of the shoulder, that would be spine related. Where is he reporting?
No, it's the first one you say. The first one
up in here,
in the top, and then in the top of the shoulder. There.
Up in here,
there.
Yeah.
Up.
So
like
that
in the traps.
pressure right there, in that moment, that deep pressure. Like if you ever had a massage, that deep pressure, symptom relief. But as soon as you're done, and that thing poofs back into its old position, if you've got a pinch in there, a compression. You ever heard of thoracic outlet syndrome, TOS?
No.
So common in a baseball pitcher, right? And what the surgery for that actually is they go in and they cut muscle away that's gotten too big and bulky in that area from a lot of this work. So these baseball players get what's called thoracic outlet. So it shoots down and into the elbow. So it gives them elbow problems, hand numbness. But it's through this area, actually deep up under here. If you reach in, it shoots out. So talk about pressure here, compensations here. Anytime you're working with a pain or an injury, always, to me, treat the opposite and adjacent side. So if I've got pain and injury here, I want to really go after this to get this area to help relieve this area. Does that make sense? Yes, it makes sense.
Yes. Yes. Even when you have a knee injury, they tell you you have to strengthen your quads, which is the opposite, right?
Yeah, so like quad strength for a knee,
Hmm.
it just kind of depends in my mind. I almost want this area to get help because this area, if it's strong and the body relies on it, and you
Yeah.
put pressure down and into that knee, you can still beat that joint up. Versus if I can get this area and this area to work together, that's going to decompress the knee and open it up for relief. And then I actually want this area to strengthen. The quad's going to come along for the ride. This quad gets overused for people that are always hips forward in the
Yeah.
brakes, in the quad, right? A skier is in
Co-
their quads a lot because they're leaning,
Yeah.
but then there's the weight that they're actually falling down
Cody?
the mountain. Yeah, what's up?
Sometimes I think it's hard to explain. How do you know when someone is back chain? And I know we can say if your hips are behind the rib cage and everything, but maybe because the feeling that like if you've never felt what being in your back chain feels, then it's hard to even want to understand it, or wanting to give it that importance in wanting to move out to in instead from in to out, etc., right? Because like if you're quad dominant, this means that you're gonna have to move this way. Maybe if they can have more clarity there. I don't know if
So
it will take too long or no. I don't want it to take any out of what today was meant
no,
for.
this is good. That's perfect. That's a great intro to this. So back chain dominance, right? Or posterior chain. Posterior chains, tissues in the back of the body. Okay, shoulders, spine, hips, calves, and then the base of the feet and the top of the head because they connect through the back chain. So anything that's going to put you in this position, what happens is people get stuck back here, and then the muscles in the body up here are doing all the work. So the quad tightens to bring the knee forward versus the hip goes back and it bounces forward because of the release pattern of a load and it shoots through. So everybody in your modern environment is going to be front chain dominant, which is toes out. Okay. So things are already going to slide forward and in, So put them in that position and let them feel how funny it feels. Just exaggerate it sometimes. I go, okay, I always want you to be moving away from this spot. So the fix is, what's the fix here? We're going to tighten the hips, close the hips, and that's going to take the hips from forward. When I tighten the hips, it's going to take the hips back, and it's going to lengthen and add tension as the spine, as the tailbone goes back into this long tissue of the back chain. Anatomy wise, I will review that. Jan is here. Sweet. Jan, you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
So, JP, am I on the right track for what you're asking?
Love it. So
Simplifying front chain dominant behavior, which is toes out, quad dominant, strong abs, strong arms. This would be a front chain dominant move. Anything I'm going to be picking up from the ground is a front chain dominant move versus a back chain dominant move is if I'm going to push that thing forward. I'm going to use the hip that goes back. It's going to load all these tissues and then bounce forward or both at the same time. So in your squat work, squat, pushing, or weight in the front of the body is going to build the pressure naturally back here where they don't have to worry about it versus weight that is here is going to put people back in this position in order for them to keep it stacked. And that's going to naturally put them in their heels and they're going to naturally start to spin out. So front chain exercise versus a back chain exercise, something that's a push related. Today, back chain work, a lot of it's going to be against gravity. Okay, so prone work, prone up off the ground, prone work, extension work, spine opens and extends versus tightens and collapses. Front chain, tight here, quads, everything's right here. Great stretch, okay? But can you get out of it and maintain a long, stable spine? And then can you match that same behavior in an exercise? That's where picking up a medicine ball slams, you're up, boom, it's here. Wow, you almost finish, bam, in a back chain position. But once you pick it back up and you lift it up, that lift, that move right here, whether it's from the ground, a catch, no matter what, if the weight is coming up, you're putting yourself in a position where you're going to naturally need to use this for your brakes, which makes this a quad dominant or a front chain behavior, which is what gets the knees and the lumbar spine in trouble. The front chain versus back chain. So the back is the bounce, it's coming out of it. Bouncy posterior chain, elasticity. I'll go through that anatomy here in a moment. Is that helpful for everybody? To simplify that for your clients?
Yes.
You talk about back chain, they need to see it, right? So I'm going to be sending images over this week in the chat that you'll want to save.
So maybe is explaining why sometimes we favor just being in, like, is it when we're pushed forward, are we limited? Also, we need to, like, when we want to reach it more, like that extension, some people have less capability than others, right? Maybe in terms of getting them out of that front chain will take some people longer than others, right? And I don't know if that's where I want to take it. Like, I want to take it in a sense, like,
back chain and front chain are going to work in synchronicity. You just don't want to be a hips forward or shoulders forward. If I can see the back of your hands, that's front chain in the shoulder. If I can see your hips in front of your rib cage, that's front chain in the quads. This is getting pulled forward. This is all short and compacted and compressed versus the natural curvature in the body from the ankle up. There's going to be some softness in the knee. If the heels come up, you're going to notice that the hips come forward, and then the counterbalance there is the head stays almost in this tracking line. And that's going to put you, if you get the head and the chin tall and tucked back, everybody do this, just follow along. Let's start from the head, the top of the spine, eyes up, chin tucked back into the body, and then lean forward and get weight out of your heels. And you're going to feel where there's a teeter. Some of you may feel it in the quads. Whoa, I got to control my falling forward. That's going to be the quads. The hips, the back chain is working in synchronicity. So you're not going to have somebody that just uses or just recruits this part of the body, the quad, but they may have a weak glute, which would overwork the tissue. So for that person, you want to give them a tactile cue, glute med. I'll show that in the anatomy. Glute medius right here. Give them a pencil, a pen, some blunt object, and put it right in the pocket. Okay, if everybody reaches and feels their hip socket, they can find their hip bone. The long band, the IT band, right behind that IT band is the glute med. If you poke it and then you say, okay, I want you to push into that, you're going to naturally get into their back chain. So if you want them to recruit it, you're going to start there and then give them something to do up here while they maintain that. Wall work, sitting in the wall, butt on the wall, and turn into it, and then reach up above. That's going to be a back chain dominant behavior that you're ingraining. And a lot of times what that's going to give is relief of symptoms that are related to overworking in this front chain behavior that's dominant in our lifestyle. So I'm sitting, side view, if I'm sitting here, front chain, right? I'm collapsed inwards. Am I comfortable? Yeah. If I sit here all day, what am I going to do when I stand up? Well, I'm going to keep this behavior. I'm going to see the back of their hands versus if I get rid of that, put it in the front, and I rest like this, notice the difference in my spine, my behavior. I'm not slumped as much as I'm going to be tall. So elevating some surface for their hands in order to target the upper part, keeping their hands on that object, and lengthening or stretching the back of the body, creating length in the upper body, breath to inflate it from within, heels off the ground, hips side to side. A lot of things you can do to stimulate that area. All you want to do is wake it up and then say, okay, I want to see if you can maintain that shape. That could be an activity that you finish with your workouts. You start, warm-up work. You move into strength work, and then you finish with recovery work that could be some priming work. Prime up the nervous system and be ready to be out the door, and giving them 3 cues to live by. Verbal, hey, I want you to stay in that shape. Visual, look at yourself in the mirror or set your camera up and see if there's a picture. What do you look like? And then tactile, where you put your hands on them. You may put your hands around their hips and pull their hips back, and then tell them to look up where the wall meets the ceiling, have them tuck the chin back in the body, and that's going to decompress a ton of area in the back of the neck. And then upper part of the shoulder, you're going to work the shoulder routines in. That's going to get that mid-thoracic. And then from here down, it's going to be the base of the lat, outside of the hip. So this is where the hip, and then shoulders open, hips close, going to put you in that back chain. So you're programming it. They don't even need to know, honestly. You can say, hey, like, this is what we're going to do today. You're the boss. You just tell them what to do. If they start asking why, that's when you can open up the conversation about back chain and front chain and avoid that confusion for people. I'm going to share my screen.
What would Gabby do in the prone since she's pregnant?
So Gabby in the prone, Gabby would not
Let,
spend
let,
time in the prone, or she would
but
need
let me.
a
I
positioning
have
pillow.
I have a secret. You know what I told my husband to give. We have like a float for the pool that's like a donut shape, and I've been laying because I miss just laying on a prone position because of my back. So I told him to inflate a donut shape floaty, and I've been laying for a couple minutes during the day. So that's how I kind of get into a prone shape right now. But instead, what I do is I do it standing. Some of the movements, I guess.
So in the prone, you're working against gravity, right? Laying on your tummy, gravity is pulling you forward. So you're forced to use the tissues on the back of the body to elevate. It's going to be deep in this spine from the base of the skull. Okay. Base of the skull all the way down into there. If I'm laying on my tummy and then I pick my chest up and now my forehead is no longer touching the floor, then this chain, all back here, all these tissues, the tiny ones, the big ones, they're all going to work in conjunction to control the head, and that is the top of the spine. If you don't have control of the head, you don't have control of the top of the spine, then it's going to affect everything below that in the spine. You're going to have, instead of these tissues pulling and helping support the rib cage down into the base of the spine, into that sacrum. This would instead turn into more like a rope system where it's just holding on for dear life. But when you lay on your tummy and you lift your head and your chest and you pick your hands up off the ground, you're going to force these long tissues down the base, down the outside of the spine to do their job. If you're pregnant, you've got a tummy that's going to stick out, so you're not going to want to crush that thing. So kneeling, putting your knees on the ground, and then tilting the hips back in that seiza position, using an elevated surface like I did with the blue seat over here with my hands on it. That's still going to force these tissues to do their job. Prone, I believe, is more difficult. It is the most difficult place to do that. It forces all these tissues to do it, which is why it's the second decompression exercise that I'm going to introduce today. The first one being supine and on your back. With a supine decompression, if you look at the relationship between the hips here, where the pelvis is, all these tissues in here, these adductors, okay? When you close the hips, when the shins and the thighs turn inwards, and that pulls the shin and the thigh inward. Whoa. Pulls the shin and the thigh inward. That's going to lengthen this. And this is that glute med I was talking about. Tracing, poking it right there. If you can get that thing to engage, tactile cue, put a pencil there, the blunt end, the eraser side, not the pokey side. Poke an eraser in there and say push into it. And they'll get that to activate. And that's going to, let's look at it on the other side. That's going to coincide all these tissues. If you can get them to engage when you close that hip, when that hip closes the other side, this all gets pulled. Okay, so it's going to pull down on this piece. And what pulls up from the sacrum is this latissimus. This is the butt cheek of the shoulder and the back. And if you can get your shoulders to open while your hip closes, you're going to create a natural base right here where this sacrum, or the base of the spine, stays put, and then anything you do above it, okay, also connects to that same spot all the way up, all the way to the rib cage. So when you inflate that rib cage with the expansion breathing we've been working on from all the shoulder work, right? What was the most important part of the shoulder work? To expand that rib cage. Why? Because it's everything glides on top of it. And now we're getting into the spine, which shows us why that rib cage expansion is so important for our stability. And if you talk about back chain dominant, it's all of these tissues that are making up your back chain per se. That's going to be the one that you notice is the most defined, I think. If you look at somebody that's got like this canal down their back, you're going to see where this muscle and this muscle pull from the ribs away from the spine and creates a, you know what I mean by a canal? Like both sides of the spine have this real fine definition. You'll see sweat drip right through it, right? Sweat from the shoulders, the back of the shoulders will stretch and go right down there and then end up in your butt crack. That is your back chain. If you can get into those areas by expanding all these tissues, keeping that head under control, head tall, chin slightly tucked, that's where that right there. If you look up and away with the neck gyroscope and you take the right, if you reach the right arm back and away and the shoulder and the underhand gyroscope, and then you look away with the chin, look to the other side, you're going to feel this tissue get a little stretch. you're going to feel all of these. Get a nice big pull. And if you can control that head, you can prevent compression in this area. It's really easy for this spot to get all crooked. This will slide out. This is called the C1, okay? The C1 is the very first cervical vertebrae. It is a golf tee, and that golf ball is this noggin. And if you have a golf ball that is not centered on that tee, it's going to roll off. It's going to create compressive forces where this bone, whoa. See those white areas on here? That's where those areas are going to glide right on top of that C1. So you've got your first major joint at the top of the spine that I want everybody to understand. So when you look left and right, it glides on top of that. Now, it does work in conjunction with the other 7 cervical vertebrae. So this is an area that works in a way in unison on its own to stabilize the head, which is where if you just imagine I've got a string tied right here to the roof, and I've got a pulley system, and I can tighten that string and it picks your head up towards the roof. You're going to feel all these get a little pull. So I want everybody to think of those muscles now when they look left and right. Feel this out. Look left, look right. Now take a big breath, because I know you didn't, and do the same thing. And you'll notice that it's a little safer to move that area. If my feet are out, my hips are in front of my body, I've got a compression in the lumbar spine, then that cervical spine is going to be affected. So first thing I teach is laying on your back for decompression work that you're going to see today, the exercise wise. Laying on your back where the back of the head touches the floor. And that means what? Everything's going to be in alignment and gravity is helping you. Open the shoulders, paint the palms up to the ceiling. That opens the shoulders, and then you close those hips. And you're going to get a natural traction now from the base as well as the top. I'm going to zoom in, look at the middle section, what's affected between all those points. The thoracic vertebrae, okay? How you can tell the difference between a C and a T vertebrae, a thoracic and a cervical, is the thoracic starts. Reach back, find the bump on the back of your neck. That's your last cervical vertebrae. Okay. C7, 1 is the very top, 7 is the very bottom. T1 is the next one. What do we notice about the thoracic vertebrae, the first one? What does it have that the cervical doesn't? That is a question.
I don't know the answer.
What do I have highlighted here?
You have
Collarbone?
your rib cage.
No.
First rib.
Yeah, the first rib, The top of
Yes.
the
So
rib.
that first rib connects where?
To your last cervical.
To the very first.
To the neck.
To the very
To the
first
very
thoracic.
first thoracic vertebrae, right underneath the last cervical.
So you've got C-spine, which is its own kind of clusterfuck if it gets all screwed up, right? Look at all these little bitty tissues. Little bitty tiny muscles. But they're part of this chain, right? They connect down. So the neck, the C-spine, while the bones are separate, the tissues attach down below. C7 is the bump, which tells you that's the base of the neck. T1 is the first one that can be affected with a breath directly because of that first rib. Second rib, I'm going to highlight it. Second rib, second T-spine. Get familiar with these shapes of these muscles, not necessarily the names. Won't ever test you on that. But I will test you on things like what distinguishes a cervical spine from a thoracic spine. What's the easiest way to find it? And that's going to be that you can trace your rib back. So everybody reach down, find a rib. There's the collarbone, right? Everybody can find the collarbone on their own body. And then you've got a first rib. That first rib is underneath it. All right, it's a very short rib. Here, I'm going to get rid of this. Very short rib, very small. Serratus anterior. Who remembers this from week 1? All right, so when we expand
I
and
do, I
elevate,
do.
boom, that thing, it's like a claw, right? Think of it like a hand with the palm on the rib cage and the fingers pointing forward. And the thumb of that hand connects right up here to that first rib. So if that first rib is out, I'd put somebody down on their hands and knees and put their elbows on the ground in order to recruit this. And that's going to pull pressure down. It's going to pull that first rib down and away. So Henry, you're a fellow with the shoulder injury, the shoulder pain, the pinch. I would really target the serratus this week to try to get that area decompressed. In order to get that serratus, this claw-like muscle, to engage, what do I have to do from the inside? What would be helpful?
Cat cow.
Yeah, like
The with a ball with a how do you call the ball? The how do you the exercise that you extend with a in
With the
with
yoga
reaching.
Good. Yeah. No, the yoga ball, the rollouts. The rollouts.
The rollouts, yeah,
The,
that one.
Or
what
or
what
the
I'm really looking for-
banded extensions, like the openings, the ones that we practiced this week. Yeah.
The banded
With the
shoulder
bands?
gyroscopes. Yep.
Uh-huh.
So really all of those exercises last week, every single one of them is going to recruit this. Every single one of them is going to require that muscle. How do I expand and stretch that from the inside? Don't overthink this. What's inside of the rib cage?
Yeah, by breathing, expanding.
That expansion breathing. Who feels like they're doing a good job with that? Who doesn't feel like they're doing a good job with that?
I think
It
I have
has
to
helped
invest
me a
more
lot.
time on it.
That I think that's the thing that I do the most because I really feel relief.
So that is going to be something that you all get much better at this week, because every exercise is based around counting your breath for this week. 3 to 5 breaths in a supine, 3 to 5 breaths in a prone. Everybody put their hand on their chest and trace down to this point. It's called the xiphoid process. That little bone, the last bone in the center. And if you push on it, you can push it in. It's bendy. If you ever get punched there, it can break. Everybody feel that?
It's yeah. If it's pointing to one side,
Are you okay? I can barely feel it, but I do, but I feel it. I mean, I can feel the
I think
last
I don't
part of
have
my
one.
rib cage.
I can't feel it.
I got kicked out. Am I back?
Yes.
yes, we can see you.
Cool. Kept recording, so that's good. So I'm back without anatomy. Take your hands, and it's going to get soft right there. Right above that soft point is your xiphoid process. Okay, so trace it down, trace it down, trace it down right there. Now take your fingers, push them in here. That's going to be where your diaphragm is. When you breathe in, that should all open and expand away from one another. That maintains this support here. When you breathe out, you should maintain that. You can even think about closing the rib cage down towards the pelvis, because that's going to promote a natural curvature in the spine. Going back to that. Everybody see my screen?
Now, yes.
So when you expand that rib cage in all directions, these have to maintain that new shape. This would technically be a front chain muscle, right? It's in the anterior chain. But what it does is it creates a center piece for the body. If you were to have a tent, okay, you could see this as the roof of your tent. And when you breathe in, those rib cages, the ribs open away from another, pull away from one another in all directions as they lift. And that is going to decompress, as we've already talked about, the T-spine. Now, moving down the spine, how are you going to find out where the lumbar spine begins? What's going to distinguish it from the T-spine? Don't overthink this.
It doesn't have ribs.
Doesn't have ribs. Okay, so instead of trying to memorize what the vertebrae look like, just use your landmarks here when you look in. If I give you a picture of just this, and I say, is this the lumbar or the cervical spine? And then I say, okay, tell me why. What is your answer going to be?
It's on the neck.
You can tell it's on the neck. How can you tell it's on the neck? Look at all this,
Because it's behind
right?
you.
Imagine a basketball. It's round. Everybody find that muscle. Give that a little love. Reach up under there. Oh, it does a lot. It does a whole bunch. Kind of keeps your head on the rest of the body in a way. If I cut that, your head's going to wobble over off to the right, because this is just going to pull it over there. So this is all your back chain. Just because it's in the back of the body, it's going to work in unison. This is a longer muscle of the back chain. This is an even longer muscle, thicker, more powerful, right? In charge of looking left and right. Chewing, head extension, lateral flexion. So looking up and taking your ear towards your shoulder is going to work this back and forth. So when you take ear to your shoulder, take your left ear to your left shoulder, take your right ear to your right shoulder, back and forth. It's going to affect all this. Now take a deep breath. Imagine there's a string on the top of your head. It's attached to the ceiling. And then go ear to shoulder. Nice and slow. that's going to affect all those areas. I want you to have the ability to distinguish C-spine from T-spine. Look at all these little processes. You think we can make an exercise that targets one of these and isolates a muscle, or do you think they all complement one another? This is why I don't want to quiz you on the anatomy per se, but I want you to know that all these muscles extend the spine, open the back of it, support the rib cage. Rib cage supports the spine. It's this synonymous relationship with one another. It's not necessarily one thing does one thing. It's it all does everything at the same time. And if you've got good thoracic expansion, if you can keep all of these tissues long and open, and you can keep that head and that base of that skull up and supported, and that ear over the shoulder, and not get your head too far out in front of your body, because then if you get your head way forward, then these muscles get tight. You want them to be lifted. You want the length in all of this because it works to your advantage. If all of this is long and open, it keeps less pressure off of what area of the body? The lumbar spine, okay, the base. These are the biggest vertebrae. This dude is a hoss, okay? You can screw up and pound that thing into oblivion. It can break on these edges and bone will grow back. That is not ideal, but that is what happens. And then right through here, see this little hole in it? This little space? I'm going to add our these little spaces in the lumbar spine. You ever seen somebody, I'm not even going to ask that, never mind. Actually, I am. You ever seen anybody piss themselves because they lifted so much weight? You know what they did? They compressed their spine. They lost their ability to hold that pee in. So when you compress this part of the spine and it shifts, when these bones press into one another for stability because the long muscles are no longer doing their work, because things slide forward and get out of whack, that can compress the spinal cord and you can lose your function anywhere below that level. So if I'm in a motor vehicle accident and I break my 7th C7, if I broke that bony point, if I got landed on my back and I hit that bone right there and it broke, pushed that forward and it compressed that spinal cord, goes right through there. Everything from that point down in the rest of the body is going to be affected. So when you start working with decompression work, head control, shoulder control, rib cage expansion, and then closing the hips will decompress and then give you this natural curvature. I'll give you, I already have this screenshotted in preparation. There's a natural curve. Thought I had it. Oh, never mind. Other iPad. Eight others. There's a natural curve in that spine. That back chain dominant behavior is what keeps that natural curve. So from this point, that T7 up to the base of the head, look at that curvature. It kind of rolls forward, but it finishes up. You've got a natural So think about keeping your pressure up and away from that T7, which is going to require you to keep those shoulders up tall. Otherwise, what happens? This shoulder collapses on itself and it'll affect this structure right here, creating compensatory patterns. So that's where pressure on top of the shoulders with that hack squat, Henry, is something I want you to start trying to replace in your programming with something that does the design of the body a little more benefit and still targets the same muscle groups that you're going after, and still ultimately comes out to serving the client in the way that you want to and they want to as well. The lumbar spine, there's a natural curve. So it's not just this straight up and down pole as much as from the tailbone to T7, the middle of that thoracic area. Okay, there's a curvature. Goes inwards and finishes outwards at the bottom. Inwards and outwards at the bottom. So think with your spine back and down, thoracic, outwards, upwards, forward, and down. When you take a breath, you elevate. When you breathe out, push that pressure down. Use that rib cage to stay expanded and push down. It's going to push into your organs, which are mainly fluid and water. And what's going to happen if you were to push into water with if you took a 5-gallon bucket and you tried to push it into the water, what's going to happen? If you go opening first, if you go out to the lake, what's going to happen?
It's gonna get filled with water.
So it actually, the air, if you push it here, let me make sure you got the right visual here. If I push this opening straight down into the water, what's going to happen? If I let go,
It's gonna pop back up.
it's going to pop back up. It's going to hit me right in the nose. Whack. So what does that tell me about the pressure inside of this cavity if I expand and then try to push it down? Where's that rib cage really going to go?
Up.
Up. So try to play with that. That's a good explanation. If not, don't do that. But I think that can help give them the feeling of what back chain dominant should feel like, which is this global pressurization of the system where it's bouncy versus tight and compressed. Front chain dominant, meh. Back chain dominant, everything's open. So I want you to think decompressed versus back chain dominant. JP, I think from here forward, maybe we get away from back chain dominant behavior.
Yeah. No, I think
And go decompressed. Although back chain dominant can be of great assistance to people that need to know why this is bad. Just get your hips back. But then the next piece is repressurize that system so it's inflated and then expanded. Which brings us to the fun part. How do we do it?
I think you did a great explanation. Like, I mean, amazing. Thank you.
Back chain dominant can be confusing for people, right? Like, what does it mean?
A little bit confusing.
It's made up.
The hips back, and sometimes you don't even feel like your hips. How can you take hips back? Sometimes that I remember that was something that was hard for me to understand. Once I felt the feeling, it was like, man, no wonder I was going to the wrong direction, you know?
I agree 100%. You have to feel it to understand it, but going over the anatomy and being able to see it helps me know where I need to put some focus in my body.
Jan, is this helpful for you when it comes to Here's where I see an application for you, CrossFit athlete, right? Like you're putting compressive forces on your body to the point that it fatigues, and a lot of people give up, and you've got to keep going.
Not
'cause it's a
anymore.
race. No?
No, not anymore. Because I'm trying to do this decompression exercises rather than being compressing myself. Because I really need to get out of pain. So that's why I stopped.
The break that you're going to take, I'm gonna tie this in. But one of the best athletes that's ever competed as a skier, her name's Michaela Schifrin. She's American. She has broken all of the records, men's and women's. A couple months ago, she had a crash on the ice. She's lucky she didn't hurt herself more than she apparently did, but she took some time off, rehab, recovery, came back and raced again this week and beat everybody by a second and a half, which is huge. Like a whole second and a half in a race where everybody's doing 90 miles an hour down a mountain. Like that is what she came back and did. So she came back fresher because she took that break. And I hope that you find that same feeling when you get back into that sport, because if you're doing it every day for training to get strong, it's going to be detrimental. If you're doing it as a sport and you're competing, you can be smart about it and continue to do that, I think, for a long time, right? You hit an age group. Clearly, there's some older folks that are still doing CrossFit. They're not putting the numbers or the speed or the weight up or the reps that younger crowd is. And you're not going to see as many people in that older field. But you have the ability to get there if you program this kind of work into your prevention and recovery side, but also that expansion work. You're going to naturally recruit that expansion work when you go to lift. Guys, if you are going to program a lift in the gym, boom. If I'm here, what do I need to do? I need to make sure that I have this and this back long before I ever load that structure. Otherwise, I'm going to collapse naturally because I don't have the length in my back chain because I'm here, and then I go to load it, and I'm just going to wreak havoc on this area of the back where the T-spine, where the ribs sit on top of the lumbar. And then this is just going to shift and slide around because the bone's going to have to compress. But if I take a breath and use the bucket analogy, boom, and then load that with a lift, I'm going to target the muscles and I'm going to avoid compressing this joint.
And I have truly felt the difference since I've tried to do like some weightlifting or some back squats or front squats, and I have felt the difference since I've been practicing these exercises that you have taught.
Cool. I can tell you in confidence that I know an NFL player that did not do any lifting off season. All he did is work that related to forward press and forward locomotion. He's pushing sleds. He's doing push-ups, and crossover work. He's doing slant forward squats. He's got weight up here. He's doing wall work. No shortage of working out, but no actual lifting from the ground. He goes back from doing that all season. Buffalo Bills tell him, you have the most improved numbers out of the entire team. You lift more percentage-wise than anybody else has. What did you do this offseason? Well, I didn't lift. And that is the benefit of all of this that will translate to someone who desires to lift more weight. If they trust you as a coach, they're going to see results. If you're programming this work in where it's consistent, and then they regain these behaviors, these habits that get taken away from us in this modern, unnatural, flat ground environment where it's so easy to go into our quads, into our inner shoulders, just in collapsing the rib cage primarily is how I see it. Collapsed rib cage versus decompressed rib cage. You get that rib cage open, you learn that those arms can go out. If you can lift weight out here and hold it and then move it, you're going to build resiliency in this upper body, and it's going to move cleanly, and it's going to make it a lot easier on your lower half. So for your knee injuries, rib cage expansion. For your lumbar injuries, rib cage expansion. For your neck injuries, rib cage expansion. It's always your primary first thing to do. Head control goes with that. I should say head control is number one, rib cage number two, and then hip and rib cage synchronicity can come number 3. But this week, spine. Next month, hip and pelvis. We're gonna tie in. I stopped at that sacrum in the anatomy, the tailbone, right? Stay off of it. If you're sitting on it, you can see how it affects the rest of the spine. If I push here, it's gonna do something upstairs. If I let it float, great. With that being said, head control. If it's far too forward, if I'm sleeping with 2 pillows a night, if I'm looking at a desk all day, if I'm driving, if I'm not doing anything to mitigate that, then I'm gonna have compression. So first thing I'll give somebody, lay on your back. Just lay on your back. Don't even worry about foot control. Let them lay in a relaxed state. And then take a picture to see what they're doing. You're gonna see feet over here. You might see feet over here. You're gonna see there'll be slight changes, a little bit slighter than that, right? So I might be over here, or I might have my head over here, and you're gonna notice where they hold their body. So you can assess them just laying on the back. If I'm right here, instead of picking up my head and moving it up here, I'm actually gonna take their feet and move them over here. And they're gonna feel this side open up versus they've been compressed in it. You move their feet over here, they're gonna open it up. Let them reach. Oh, wow. Decompress that quadrant. So got somebody on the back, see where they go. Tell them to bring their big toes together. Tell them to bring their knees up. Tell them to close their hips. Give them a piece of paper or a pencil or a quarter or a rubber band or a Jolly Rancher, something that they want. Say, I want you to hold it right here. Don't let me have it. If you drop it, I get to keep it. Now there's a reason for them to close their hips. They don't even need to know that it's for back chain or hip or lumbar spine. Just say, hey, hold the Jolly Rancher. So you're going to hold the Jolly Rancher there. You want to see if they can spread the toes. You want to see if you can, I'm going to give you a side view here. Just lower half. Can you see? Yes. I want you to think knees slightly up. The other way to do this is to drag the heels about 3 inches. 1, 2, 3. And you're going to feel, if you're doing that, you're going to feel how that anchors into the base of the spine. That recruits the back of the hamstrings. So you can do these and warm it up. Heel drags. Hand on your back, heel drags. Okay? Now, heel drags and pause, toes towards the nose. Take a breath, expand, and then pause and exhale. 3 of those, each one bigger than the last. Changes you can make for them, cues you can give them. Open the shoulders, lift them up off the ground, put them back down. Take a breath. Pick up the head, put it back down.
Is your back flat against the ground?
Good question.
Completely?
I'm relaxed. My back, a lot of people will try to arch it, right? They'll try to put an arch in their back. Let it rest flat. Let it just gravity. Completely relaxed. And say, I don't even want you thinking about the back. I want you thinking about closing the hips, bringing the knees slightly up, dragging the heels towards the butt. And what will naturally happen is there'll be a curvature there. You'll be able to slip a hand between there. And when you take a breath that expands and elevates, that space will get larger. But it's not because I'm making it larger. It's because I'm expanding the rib cage and that inflates from above. And then as I take my heels towards me, I'm tightening and closing the hips, and that's pulling down and away. So that's going to naturally create this curvature that in the anatomy is there presently. I'm going to go back for that inside of the body look. Okay, that natural curvature right here. You're going to be on that. That's going to be touching the ground. That's going to be touching the ground. And that's going to be touching the ground. and there's going to be a natural space, but it's not forced. If you tell somebody to push their back flat in the ground, then they're going to compress something
No pelvic tilt and
right
then
about here. Right, like pelvic tilt. This is where, all right, I'll jump ahead.
Like that. I like that. I like that.
Pelvic tilt, okay? Pelvic tilt. This is where I teach the pelvis and the hip together to get
Isn't
away
the
from
pelvic tilt?
I want to get away from that terminology because the pelvic tilt is really just an isolation of what somebody's seeing in the pelvis. But what's really going along when that pelvis tilts, that pelvis is the powerhouse. If it tilts, it's because the head's going somewhere. If that head goes forward, that pelvis is going to, oh, can I get it to rotate? I can't flip him upside down. Maybe I can. Well, he doesn't move. He's way too stagnant for this question. This head, when it moves forward, if it goes over here, that pelvis is going to tilt, right? Because the heels come up off the ground, the pelvis is going to tilt. But if you drive that pelvis forward, that's why I don't even want to talk about it as a tilt, because it's really the pelvis. Where does it go? Does it go forward, back, left, right? And what that thing does is it rotates. It goes around. When I turn my upper body, when I turn my head, if my head goes into the left column, that pelvis is going to shift one side up, one side down, and turn towards that side. And it's going to reciprocate. It wobbles. It doesn't just tilt forward and back. It doesn't just turn side to side. It wobbles. It rotates. Everybody just put your hands on your hips and do the hokey pokey, right? Like take your pelvis all the way around. You can't see me. It's probably good. Stop sharing. Okay, so pelvis, pelvic tilt, right? Really, it's the head. Head goes forward. Where does the pelvis go? It's going to come up and back. And that behavior, up and back versus jumping forward. Now, look at this from the front, up and back, down and forward, up and back, down and forward. What happens if I slam over here? If I'm over in the right side, I can still go pelvis tilt, but what's really happening? That thing's turning. So it wobbles, it moves. You just put your hands on these hips side to side. A lot of people will have a dominant behavior. It's this one. Pelvis will push forward. The lower back compresses. The rib cage collapses. And then they take that. It gets stuck. All these tissues, these deep muscles, the connective tissue. It's not really even a muscle. It's just rubber bands. Thousands of little rubber bands that connect. And then you build that stability. Those things don't get stretched anymore. You ever left a bungee cord out for the winter or the summer in the sun? You do that for a few years, it doesn't get used. You go to pull on it again, I'm like, this thing doesn't have any stretch anymore. You lose your elasticity. That's where I think the pelvic tilt comes in, is people get stuck in that behavior. They get stuck in this compressed area, and it affects the pelvis because of all the weight that hits on top of this pelvis. This pelvis is your center of mass, which is what lesson number 1 of hip and pelvis is going to be. That pelvis, though, is affected by everything we're learning: spine, shoulders. All of this has a huge effect on this, which is the powerhouse. If my pelvis goes that way, guess where I'm going? I'm going that way. It's going to go. I'm going with it. One of the best things I could do as a small person playing basketball was get my hand on a bigger person's pelvis, find that hip bone. I'd get a hand down in there. I'd push. And I'd turn their body. If I know they want to go that way, I'd push them that way, and I'd keep them from going that way, because they can't go that way if I have a hold of them right there. And it doesn't take much for me to be here to get this part of my hand and turn the pelvis that way. Now, they can go that way, and there's nothing I can do about it. They can go here. There's nothing I can do about it. But recreational basketball, one of those touches every now and then, somebody I can hide it. They don't know that I'm doing it on purpose. It might have just been inadvertent in their mind, and they're not going to raise a big fuss. But knowing that you can turn somebody, this comes in for you as a coach, take your hand, turn somebody's pelvis. Let them feel if they're having trouble getting into their squat. If you notice in their squat, they're just over here. What do I need to do? I need to turn their pelvis. I need to get them back over here. Get them, their head, their chest over that way. So pelvic tilt, it's really a neutral position. And when the head goes further, that thing goes further back because it's got a counterbalance where my head goes. So the higher my head, the more that pelvis becomes neutral. The head starts to go backwards, that pelvis tilt per se. Tilts this way and that way. And calling it anterior and posterior tilt just does it a disservice for what that thing's really doing. But that is what the majority of anatomy lessons will call it. And you'll find endless fitness articles and lessons on pelvic tilt. You won't really hear me talk about a tilt. You'll hear me talk about a load and a release and you've got all these behaviors, right? This is going to be an exercise that we integrate, but if I don't have the spine long and decompressed and I start messing with the pelvis and I'm down here, I'm just going to torque people's vertebrae. So I don't even need to be touching this yet until I've got somebody that can show that they can decompress, maintain control, and then we can start working on tilt work. Is that helpful?
For me, it was very much.
Yeah. And if, for example, if you're lying in the floor, can you do the pelvic tilt there so that your back will be straight on the floor? Or do I have to leave the natural curve?
So if I tilt the pelvis, if I push my lumbar into the ground, I'm compressing the lumbar spine. If I'm pulling my heels towards my butt and closing my hips and then opening my shoulders, it's pulling pressure up and away from that pelvis. So I would never try to push the back or tilt the pelvis in this decompression work. I really want to target tissues below it, the inner thighs, all those inner thighs, right? Closing the hips and then hold it. And that's going to pull down. That's where the standing, close the hips, okay? Hips behind the rib cage, close the hips, tall, decompress the spine, and that's creating this long elongation of the spinal column, which is going to free up weight above so the pelvis can tilt in any direction possible. If I'm compressed from above, it's going to push that pelvis. If I'm compressed forward, it's going to push that pelvis. If I'm expanding and elevating and leaning forward, that pelvis is going to turn and shift, and that's what's going to create that natural curvature in that low back. But it's not like I'm not ever trying to bend the back. A lot of people will try to, hey, I need to get this shape like this, and really like this is just compressing. You're just compressing something in the spine, because the spine can be compressed from here, can be compressed from here, it can be compressed from here. But if you expand and elevate, then you elongate it and lift pressure up and away, and then also bucket analogy, down where you push that diaphragm and it's going to lift that rib cage even just a little further. And it's all those muscles that I showed you that attach to all those vertebrae that are creating that behavior. But it's not like, hey, I'm going to flex that muscle and do that. It's knowing that when I close the hips and open the shoulders, that's going to put me back in that position where it's long and open and decompressed. So you do that supine work on your back.
Cody, but is this only for decompression purposes? Because then you see most of the exercises when you're doing ab work or core work, they most of the time they tell you your back must be flat against the
So
floor, right?
for ab work, um,
Or for example, when you're doing some lying on the floor presses, they always tell you your back must be
here.
flat on the floor.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
So
you can put your heels
this
up
right
or down.
here, this right
Uh-huh.
here, I would never press from here like a bench press, because really you're going to achieve the same thing from here. And if you give a weight vest for somebody here, you're going to build that shoulder without slamming it into the floor, without pressing the spine
But
into
one
the
is
floor
a
and then adding weight.
push.
And then weight hanging from above you. JP
Yeah,
No,
like
needs
when
no, I
that.
think
like the
no,
boot
I
you
think they're
hang
just
from
asking because they've heard this before. I think their question is more like sometimes in other people cue you that when to be lying on your back, they tell you to put your lumbar, like press your
Pressing
lumbar on the
flat on the
ground.
back.
Uh-huh.
yeah,
See,
flat.
And I think
the
that's
lumbar
they're
spine
asking
has a
that.
curve in it though. So if you press that lumbar in the spine, you're just creating compression upwards into the spine, because that lumbar spine has to have that curvature. And for the supine work, the only thing I ever do with people on their back is the supine decompression, and then I'll do the pelvis work, and then we'll do foot and the ankle work on my back. But it's because I'm working against gravity. Gravity's pulling me down. I'm expanding and opening up. So your first exercise this week in the video I'm going to post is the supine decompression. It's laying on your back. You're not thinking about back. You're thinking about closing the hips and opening the shoulders. You're thinking about thumbs at the base of the rib cage. Put your thumbs right where the ribs are, the very bottom part of the rib, as far down, and then the pinky, put it on top of the hip bone, the pelvis. And that space right there is really where your lumbar spine is, because what do we know? With the last rib, what's the next vertebrae? The next vertebrae is the lumbar, the top one. So you're opening up, and then you're maintaining that space. You're checking with your hands, the space between your thumb and your pinky. You're making sure that that stays long. And that's going to decompress that spine. So it'll actually lift it up off the ground in that moment, not consciously, but because it's a behavior that is affected by when the hips close and the shoulders open. You pick that head up and put it back down, and you'll notice some people are compressed and tight, and then they do an expansion breath, their head starts to look up. Have them pick their head up, tuck the chin towards the chest, and lay it back down. And that's what's going to get the cervical spine. So if my head is here and my chin is up and I'm doing my decompression breath, and you notice that, have them pick up the head off the ground, tuck the chin, and lay it back down. And that's going to elongate the cervical spine, which will pull pressure up and away from the lumbar spine and up and away from the pelvis. So
I saw that one.
pelvic tilt, throw it in the trash. Somebody telling you to push their back flat into the ground does not understand the spine for how it's truly designed. And that's not their fault. They've likely been taught something that's been accepted. That is the world that we live in. And these exercises, it's a great question, because what I'm giving you is hopefully a simpler version of this. I don't want to make your life harder. I want you to go, okay, well, I don't even have to cue about the back. If somebody asks me, that's a client, not a coach, because I want you to understand more of the reasons. But let's say I have 30 minutes with them that day, their back hurts, and they go, what should I do with my back? I said, forget about it. I want you to think about your hips. Hold that Jolly Rancher and open the shoulders and expand the rib cage, and every breath should be bigger, and forget about your lumbar spine. And when they get up, whoa, I don't have that pain there anymore. Well, you forgot about it and you let that pain leave. You let that compression leave. It will leave and go somewhere else in the body, which is why we want this open chain shoulder work we started with. These compressions in the spine will work their way out into this area. And if we can get it into this area and into the elbow and into the hand, man, that's good news. As long as it's not like a nerve pain in the elbow, but if you got like tightness in the fingers and the hand after doing some of this decompression work, Laying on your back, thumbs on the base of the rib cage, pinky top of the pelvis. Deep breath. You see where all this lifts and starts to shift up? Maybe it gets caught behind the ear. Okay, so jaw work. Oh. All those tissues we looked at today in the anatomy, that's going to work pressure up and away and out of the spine. It'll exit in the form of being able to move better in the upstairs because you can get that compression out of this. We get out of this and more into this and more into this. Great cue, great thought. When you guys walk around, look down the bridge of the nose. When you walk into the gym, get that head tall. That chin should be slightly back. You don't want to be out here because the longer my head goes more forward, the more pressure where? Deep in that spine, kind of at the base of that thoracic, the lumbar spine, that curvature, it's in there. I'm just going to compress the front of it, and I'm going to spit out, or I'm going to pelvic tilt, or I'm going to slam into my knees because my head is taking everything for a ride versus control the head, top of the spine, head tall, chin tucked. You'll see that in the laying on your back work. The supine decompression is 100% for decompression purposes. However, your breaths matter. If you're taking 3 sets of 3, that's just right, in my opinion. When you go to 5 sets of 5 breaths, that's the difference in 9 and 25 breaths. That's a duration that's a huge jump. But if I'm going to do 5 sets of 5 breaths in supine, that can be a workout in itself. If you've got somebody that's in a lot of pain, 1 breath. Okay, awesome. Now we're going to bring our big toes together. Okay, we're going to bring those big toes together for somebody that's in a lot of pain. Can they tolerate this? Can they take a breath? Oh, very nice. All right, let me pick those shoulders up. Can you shift your weight? Can you kind of rock side to side? Can you pick the head up and lay it back down? So there's some freedoms to all these exercises, some freestyles. What I want you to know about the freestyles, you're always trying to keep pressure points from building up. So if the back of my head's on the ground and I'm decompressing here and it just stays on the back of the ground, that compression in the lumbar spine is likely just going to end up between my shoulders, right? Who knows somebody that says, man, I hurt right here? Yeah,
Me and my husband.
Right, from here. It's from this. It's from a lot of this. It's from a lot of grab. It's from a lot of leaning forward. So to get that pressure out of there, you're going to have to pick that head up and put it back down. You don't have to hold it up. So it's not hold it up to decompress. It's pick it up and put it back down, because that keeps the pressure from building up right here. Here, tuck the chin towards the chest. So you'll hear me cue to tuck the chin to the chest, big toes together, heels apart, rotate the inner thighs together, thumbs at the base of the rib cage, pinkies top of the pelvis, and take the biggest, most expansive breath you can. 2 more of those. The purpose here is to elongate the spine. That's it. That's the purpose of that supine decompression. Once you've got a better idea of that, we can work the hands into it, press the fingertips together, the shoulder work, and all the way up. And that's going to just create a much bigger. Then I'm going to focus more on the lower half, toes towards the nose. I might work in some ankle work, toe work. Okay. This is in the pelvis routine in advance, but I want you to master elongation of the spine, supine decompression before and after workouts, and then morning and evening. So we create these behaviors in the body. We create these new habits that maintain these shapes. From there, what's next? Now that gravity was helping us, okay, now we're going to be on our tummy. Gravity is no longer helping us. We're working against it. If I don't have control of my head, what's going to happen? I'm going to bang it into the floor. I'm going to rest my forehead. I'm going to rest my hands. And I'm going to slowly lift that forehead like 1 inch or 2. A lot of people want to lift it way too far up. Side view. 1 inch or 2. Okay? Not too far up, because up here, where's all that pressure go? right there. If I'm like this, I don't want to further compress that area in the back. I want to elongate. So think about head tall, chin slightly tucked to the body so it decompresses the back of the head. Float the hands and just take a breath. What you'll notice is your chest will separate itself from the floor naturally by expanding the rib cage. Your forehead will separate itself from the floor. So when you notice the head's getting further from the floor and you breathe out, maintain that space. Don't let the head fall back and clunk. That tells me what are we targeting in the prone work? Back chain. Okay, all those tissues we went over in the anatomy, deep into the shoulders, deep into the back of the neck, deep along the thoracic, deep along the lumbar, the latissimus dorsi, the butt cheeks of the shoulder, the giant muscles in the base, the obliques. All of this work has to work in order to float the hands, float the forehead, and then close the hips just like we did. That's the second exercise that's in this week, is the prone work. The third and fourth are derivatives of not just gravity. This is the hardest one, by the way. Prone work, hardest exercise, because you're recruiting everything to keep your body from slamming back into the ground. The kneeling work, which we did last week for the shoulder series, where I introduced some of these decompression concepts just by way of expanding the rib cage. The kneeling work the further I get my chest forward, the more your feet are going to want to come off the ground. So push the tops of those feet into the ground, lean forward, and you'll feel the limit where you can't quite get any further. You'll feel the butt engage, you'll feel the hamstrings, you'll feel the calves, and then you can lift and expand that rib cage. You're looking for this shape. This is a great position to work in resistance work, banded shoulder gyroscopes. You saw that at the end of the last week. The prone and the supine work, the decompression work, is going to prep you for that work. So supine and prone work is going to prep you for any exercise. Supine decompression, prone decompression, kneeling decompression, where you can work in shoulders, and then standing decompression. This is the one you can do at the gas station. You can do it when you're anywhere, okay? And it's going to go straight feet, thumbs at the base of the rib cage, pinkies top of the hip bones. I'm going to open the shoulders, and I'm going to decompress the rib cage, 3 sets of 3, and then I'm going to close the hips and take the butt back. From here, I'm going to open the palms, reach forward, hands together, eyes come right through this point, drive forward. As those raise up, the eyes go through that spot. I want you to line those hands up where the wall meets the ceiling, and then you're going to take your butt directly away from that point, from the side view. Close, boom, boom. Decompress, reach the hands, reach the butt back, close the hips, decompress the spine with a what? If you do those 3x3s, you're going to get a global presentation of a decompressed frame. And then when you walk out of that, you should have your bounce back. You're going to alleviate pains in the shoulders. You're going to alleviate pains in the neck, in the back, with the meat and potatoes of this program, which is your decompression work. Questions? That is all the exercises for this week.
Well, for
Perfect.
me,
No
that
questions for me.
awesome.
I will be dropping a link to these. Spine Series Week 1, which is kind of a short 2-minute review of what I just went over. Clear and concise. Once again, these are well, I thought I could get There it is. Spine series.
Do you recommend prone work 3 times a day, same as the shoulders,
Great question.
or especially for the ones who need it, like me?
Yes, the more the merrier, JP. If I say 3 times a day, is that a doable? That's when it comes to application of this. If
I
you tell
kind of
somebody to do it
freestyle.
15 times, you've been in this a lot longer too, JP. So you're going to be able to freestyle. I'm going to give you that freedom to go, hey, you can work in and out of these positions, but if you need a checklist, 3 times a day is almost the bare minimum. If you're trying to alleviate symptoms, I don't do it enough. I need to reset my.
When I do a checklist, is I can tell what's working and what's not, because when I freestyle, I'm not really sure if something's hurting me or something's not, you know? So
I would say I simply want you to add 3 sets of 3 throughout the day. 3 sets of 3 before you do your shoulder work versus 1 set of 3 before you do first shoulder, second set of 3 in the second time, third set of 3 in the evening. I feel like that's going to be a lot more achievable as a goal. And when you hit that 3, then the next week I'd up you to 5 breaths. I'm going to increase the volume or the duration of these exercises, but early on you're adding something new. Start with 1 set of 3 breaths, because if you get good at it, you're just priming the system. And then from there, you're moving right into a shoulder series. It's going to continue that same shape. You're just adding more behavior, more movement, which makes it a little more difficult. So let's do this. Add prone, and add supine. I'm going to throw all these videos. There are multiple cuts of the same exercise. The stuff in the gray shirt is the old stuff. So technically supine, decompression, and prone decompression with the reaches. The reaches are what make it a little tougher. It's the thoracic gyroscope, which really ties us into week 2 and week 3. So really today, how I think I designed it is supine work and standing work first. Yeah, supine, prone, kneeling, sitting, and standing. Prone work, I'm taking it away. I introduced an exercise. The prone work is for next week. So congratulations, everybody's ahead. But that's okay, because you're gonna have a ton of questions, and this is the kind of work that takes a lot of cueing. You'll hear me say the same cues over and over again. That's why I sent you more than one video of each. You're gonna see how I cue it. At the conclusion of this week, I'm gonna start dropping videos of me working with people, and you'll see how I start to build this prone, supine to prone, prone to kneeling, kneeling to standing in its entirety, which is going to open up pelvis and hip and foot and the ankle for the coming weeks. But I'm going to start giving you all film of how I work with a client soon. Let me look. Lateral 2. Next week, we're going to discuss the lateral bend of the spine. Today, we just did the elongation of the spine. Next week, we're going to do the lateral bend. And then the third week, we're going to tie everything in and start to take it more in a traveling sense. The thoracic, the shoulders, the reach across the cervical, the elbow packs, the look ways, the half knee, and internal look lumbar pelvis. So there's a ton coming. The supine and the prone decompression for this week and next week are your foundation for week 3, which is when things start to open up and we get out of these static boxes soon. We're not going to be spending time just on a mat. Key points anatomically. Any questions on that?
I just want to make sure they understand the difference between open and closed, and when one side is one column is open, one side is closed. O sea, like when you say that, I want to make sure they understand it.
So opening and closing a column is where the lateral bend of that spine is going to be so important.
Maybe for next, yeah.
It is. It's coming. So kind of jumping ahead. When I say open, I want you to open the shoulders. At this point, I want you to think shoulders open. Open shoulders, okay? Thumbs back, palms up versus closed shoulders. Closing the shoulders and opening the hips is a great way to what? Blow out your back. Opening the shoulders and closing the hips is a great way to decompress the back. So you're opening the shoulders up, cross, down. Any of the shoulder routines that we've already integrated is what I want you to start doing in a standing version and in the supine work. In the prone work, I want you to stay static, head in the middle. There's reaches. You can follow along with that, but that's going to make more sense when we go through what happens in the spine with a lateral bend and a tilt, which is where the pelvis comes in. We kind of touched on that today. But that is another long road that we're going to I want you to dwell on this week. Corey's in. Allowed to speak. So opening of a column, I will kind of answer that. Guys, when you open, I think of the door opening. So my chest will open. And if I'm going to close, if I'm going to open it to the left side, then this is closing the left side, which opens it to the right. And the same thing is going to happen with shins and thighs. When I take a step forward, I'm going to open the thigh and open the shin and open the pelvis and open the spine and open the shoulders and then put the head in that column. And that's going to open this column. And then when I'm ready to close it, I'm just going to go open the other column and the other one will close naturally. Boom, boom. So you start to reciprocate that behavior. That is where, when it comes to static, you asked about a press. A press is such a static head in the middle move. I really prefer a head open into a column, and then a press into that column, and then a step into the other side and a press into that column. So a great exercise for that could be landmine work, barbell down, step in, and I'm going to go from this side's closed, okay? I'm going to open it and press that exercise through. It could be a dumbbell. I'm going to press it. 2-pound dumbbell, I'm going to press it. When you punch a bag, it's from this side's closed. You're going to open the left side and close the right side. Pow, pow, and it just reciprocates. So when we start programming exercises by the conclusion of all this, the application part, that's where this work becomes opening. And then if you know, hey, this person's got a compression on this side, what do I need to do? I need to open that pelvis. I need to open this lumbar spine, which tells me I need to close this hip and open this shoulder. Versus, boom. And that's going to feed these tissues and create space and conditioning and synovial fluid and open up these old rigid compressed structures. If I'm compressed over here, where does my spine spit its disc out? Over here. So my bulging disc, I'm going to have pain possibly over here from being compressed over here. So this is where chasing pain around, oh, the pain's right here. Well, shoot, that could be really anything. We're going to have to learn to analyze the entire system, which rib cage is such a big piece of that. It fixes so many things. It's your bread and butter. It's your meat and potatoes. To just give somebody that feeling of that, what they should be in. And they're like, whoa, like I'm not very strong there. You're going to have people when they do it standing have these reaction responses. When you get really good at it, you can recruit an elasticity response. Ooh. That's a behavior that when you figure out how to work all your tissues against one another, they recruit each other. It creates that vibration that's internal. And when you're going to start to possibly feel that in the supine work. The more you do it, the more you press the fingertips together, the more you're aware of that serratus that we worked on today. Remember, the serratus pulls up and down from the base of the spine and up from the thoracic. So it just closes, it secures the shoulder. Boom, boom, boom. Right there's great serratus work. Out here, that serratus is still engaged, but now I'm getting more of the upper shoulder, deep in the spine. Right there, boom. What's that open? Front of the spine, front of the chest, gives me more space. I want to maintain that space. So solid review, I hope, on what I want you to know this week. And JP, great questions. And when it comes to opening everything, and I don't know if I'm 100% ready to quiz them on that yet until I get to the pelvis and the shin and the thigh and how that all synchronizes with what we're about to learn, which is not just the elongation. Week 1, elongation. Week 2, lateral bend. Week 3, the coil behavior. We're going to bust out some rope. You have jump ropes? You need jump rope for week 3.
Yes, we have.
Jump rope for week 3, and then dumbbells for week 2. You don't have them, that's fine for our lecture for next Tuesday, but we're going to start picking up equipment this week and the next. Lightweight, right? I don't want to go, okay, I'm decompressed. Now let's compress the shit out of that frame again, because now you're just working against each other. You want to see, okay, can you decompress and hold it? Great. Can I give you some weight and can you maintain that behavior? No, I'm taking the weight away. And we're gonna see if we can increase the volume another way and then go back to the weight. Application skill set. That's how this unit, all these units will end with an application session where I'm going to test you. Hey, how are you programming this? What does your go-to routine for clients look like? I'm going to give you these examples by the end of it. You're going to have a sheet where you can do whatever you need to, and adapt it, right? Like, I'm not going to say, hey, you have to do it this way. Sign here. It's going to say, hey, this is what I do with people. This is the videos that you've seen. Now that you understand the global concepts, that way I'm not showing you all these videos and then all the questions are coming from left and right field. I want to build your awareness, neck, shoulder, spine. That's where we're at today. We kind of did a global overview of the cervical spine, the thoracic spine, and the lumbar spine. If you get a chance, look more into that anatomy. The more you look at it for yourself, the better you're going to understand it. I can sit here and talk anatomy all day, but unless you're actually studying it, spending some time, there's drawings and figures all over the internet. There's really not bad anatomy. You're going to find what's great. I use the Essential Anatomy 5 app. Totally worth it for me in a presentation sense, for exploration sense, but you don't have to have it. There's other means to do it. Don't get hung up in the insertion, the origin, the names, the what they do, because even you'll find some things I'll disagree with, like, hey, they say that this muscle is an adductor, but really it abducts the hip. More on that in the future. But don't get hung up in what they do and be chasing, oh, well, this, if I need this weight to get closer to my body, shoot, I need a bicep. Don't get hung up in that world, because it's really the global column that reciprocates on both sides. If one side's pulling, the other side's stabilizing, and that's what you're going to feel when you get into your back chain per se, which is what this work is. Back chain dominance, posterior chain. Weakest line in the body for most modern humans, but the strongest and most durable and most powerful, because it's a big rubber band. It opens and then it shoots, and it'll close that gap quick. Have a great week. Send me any questions in the chat.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Cody.
Absolutely. Love y'all.
Great
Talk
class.
to you later.
Great session. Bye-bye.